Welcome to Tycoons of Small Biz, a podcast designed for small business owners, the backbone of the American economy. Join us as our hosts Austin and Landon share insights and experiences as small business owners, active investors and operators who have started, bought, sold, and grown several successful businesses. Tycoons is powered by Backbone Planning Partners, a business consulting and wealth management firm built specifically to serve small and medium-sized businesses.
Hello, Tycoons, and welcome to today's episode of Tycoons of Small Biz. I'm your host, Austin Peterson, coming to you from Gilbert, Arizona, and I'm joined by my co-host, Landon Mance, freshly in Boise, Idaho. It's been over a month now, so I don't know, maybe we shouldn't even mention that it's fresh or it's new. You're like, pronouncing Boise the right way, and all things are good in Boise now, right?
Yeah, potatoes for every meal.
That's right. Potatoes, baked potato for dinner, French fries for lunch, hash browns for breakfast. Yeah.
That's you're not that far off base there.
All right. Well, Landon, it's a beautiful day here in Arizona. It's starting to get hot, so we got to kind of prepare for that. The cooler temperatures are now gone, so it's basically triple digits from here on out for us. I know it's actually been pretty hot in Boise as well, so I think you might be a little bit surprised when you go outside and realize, wait, why does it still feel so hot? And that elevation getting you closer to the sun, even though the temperature itself is lower, sometimes that sun feels a little bit more intense than you were used to in Vegas.
I'll tell you what, man, that was exactly the case yesterday. We went for a little afternoon family walk, and it was about 96, and we experienced that. And that was actually my exact thought as we were walking back into my house from our very short walk because the kids got too hot. I'm like, man, this sun actually, it feels a little different. It feels a little bit more intense.
Yeah. I don't know exactly what the elevation is in Boise, but I would think it's probably somewhere around 4,000 to 4,500. But it's one of those things. It kind of shocks me every time I go up to Utah and I think, well, wait a minute, it's only 95. Why do I feel so freaking hot? And Utah, I know Provo, Utah is at 4,500, which is about 3,000 feet higher than I am here in the Phoenix Valley. So it makes a difference.
Yeah, well, after a quick 3-second Google search, Boise is actually only at about 2,700.
2,700. Wow, That's lower than I would have thought. So, yeah, 96 though it's still hot. So. I'll take it over 110. 108 is what it hit here yesterday, so I'll take it.
Well, let's not reveal any more of Boise's secrets. Okay, let's move on to the episode.
Yeah, we don't need any more Californians making their way to Boise these days. All right. Well, let's kind of get into the topic here. I don't think people listened in to listen to our weather report, so. Today's topic is your business your retirement plan and why that's not enough, right? So really what we're trying to do is challenge the assumption that selling your business will fully fund your retirement and make sure that you understand that it's important to build a more strategic or diversified retirement roadmap, right? So if you've listened to episodes in the past, you've heard me say that, I hear this all the time from clients or prospective clients. My business is my retirement plan. And it may very well be a good portion of your retirement plan. Hopefully it's not all of it. But you got to kind of build an actual roadmap, understand, first of all, what it's worth. Is it going to be enough and when, right? Because it may not be enough today, but maybe it will be in 10 years or maybe it will be in 20 years. And it's important for you to kind of know that. So, everybody who's a business owner and probably even more often somebody who's not a business owner but knows a business owner as a close family member or a friend or whatever, feels like, oh, they own a business. They're just going to sell the business and they'll retire rich and they can do it whenever they're ready. But the reality is you kind of have to go through this timing mechanism, right? This planning process, right? I think of fail to plan, plan to fail, right? And we always tell clients or prospective clients that, you should be engaging a firm like ours to help you build that roadmap well in advance of actually selling it, right? So it should be done 3 to 10 years prior to actually selling it, depending on what shape your business is in today. But a minimum of 3 years is kind of what you should shoot for and plan for. If you're at the point where you need to sell the business in the next year, certainly reach out. We're happy to talk through what realities are, and maybe you'll have to understand that maybe that has to be reframed. But it's really just kind of understanding all that. What's the value worth? What am I going to have to pay in taxes? What personal expenses am I running through the business today that I'm going to have to take on my own, right? That's going to affect my personal cash flow. All those types of things are the types of things that you need to know before you actually pull the trigger on that sale. Anything else you'd add there as an intro to the topic, Landon?
No, I mean, I think just aligning all that stuff, man. I mean, just there's a lot of examples I'm sure that we're going to cite, right? Where you're forced into a business sale, a liquidation, closing the doors because people just wait too long and they get sick, they get divorced, they have a partner fallout, the economy takes a big dump and impacts their industry, really harshly. There's a lot of things that happen, and every single one of us knows stories from other entrepreneurs that have had something transpire in their lives that was unplanned, and they're not capitalizing on close to what their business is worth, not even in the ballpark, because just from poor planning.
Yeah. I mean, they're not capitalizing when it's time to sell. They're not prepared for that unforeseen circumstance that you mentioned, right? And in a minute, I'll kind of share an example of that happening to one of our clients. Despite us laying out the plan, here is the plan, them saying, yes, but let's do this first type of a deal. And if they had dealt with that, then they wouldn't have found themselves in the tough situation that they found themselves in. So, it's reality. And I'm going to amend what I said earlier a little bit, where I said it's, 3 to 10 years. I hearken back often to Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, where he says, begin with the end in mind, right? So if you're setting out to start a business, or you've recently started a business, I'm not saying you have to have the full roadmap planned out, but if you've built the business or started the business today, at least set something and say, here's my goal, right? I'm this age. I want to sell the business in X number of years, and I want to sell it for this amount of money. And if you set that, then you can kind of go backwards into building an actual plan that can get you there. But if you don't have that laid out and you don't have a plan from the get-go, it's going to be pretty tough to actually get there, right? And most business owners don't do it. I'm starting the business. It's going to take care, like all you're focused on right now is, I've set some money aside probably, right, to build this business. I've maybe walked away from a job, or maybe I have a job right now, but I'm going to walk away from it pretty soon, and I need to replace my income. Can I do that and cover the expenses of the business and continue to reinvest to grow the business? That's kind of about as far as most business owners get. We're suggesting that you take it further. It will help you to get there quicker, and it will help you to get there with a business that's being run more efficiently and has more value to somebody who's hopefully going to buy that in the future. Makes sense?
Yep. And I would add to that not just trying to identify what you want to sell the business for, but like, how does that actually fit into the big picture, right? If by doing proper planning with, a team like ours, that in order to fund your lifestyle and live the, perfectly designed retirement that you want to live, you need 10 million bucks. Like, okay, well, you may never have a business that's going to be worth 10 million. Like, odds are stacked very, very highly against you that you're going to ever sell your business for 10 million. But okay, well, can you accumulate 3 million, 5 million, $7 million along the way so that you only need to sell your business and fill that gap? And that is what you and I preach every single day. We get as high up on that mountaintop as we can get, and we preach it because we know the statistics are not in our favor. Like 80% of small businesses are never going to sell, transfer, transact, which means you're not going to capitalize on what you built. And here's the kicker: for the businesses that do sell, most businesses are selling for, let's say, these are successful small businesses. These aren't small mom and pop 1, 2, 3 person teams. These are, businesses that are doing a couple $1,000,000 a year in revenue. Most businesses are selling between, probably 5 to 800,000 on the low end, up to about 2 to 3 million bucks, right? And when the dust settles and you pay transaction fees and taxes, and all of a sudden you're left with, I don't know, 60%, 70% of what you sold for, and then you reverse engineer that into what kind of income that can create, it's not very much. So, one of the points that we're drilling in on here is like, you can't retire on valuation, right? You need cash flow, right? And so, and all the things that you mentioned come into play there, right? The economy, buyer demand, business performance, exit value. There's a lot of different factors that come into play when you are actually taking your business out to market, and sometimes are significantly better than others. And I don't think we're going to necessarily get into this today, but like we've talked extensively about like the emotional side of things, right? A business owner, they're used to writing the checks, signing the checks, corner office, big decision maker, big relationships. Everybody's relying on you, not just in your company, but probably your family, your church, members of the community, right? And then all of a sudden, all that goes away overnight when you sell your business. And that is a whole different set of emotional, which also turn into physical, spiritual, intellectual challenges that are presented, by selling the business.
Yeah. I want to just kind of hone in on a couple of things you mentioned, right? So you said you can't retire on valuation. You actually need the cash flow from the sale, right? And it's the net amount that you receive, right? After the taxes, after the transaction fees, all that kind of stuff. And I think a lot of times people underestimate how much actual cash you need sitting there after all of the things that you just mentioned to generate the cash flow that they need, right? So they're underestimating the amount that generates the cash flow. And then they're also underestimating the amount of cash flow that they need because of all the things that they've run through the business for all these years that they now have to pay on their own, right? Like you have to pay your own auto insurance now, right? You're not driving a company vehicle any longer. So the auto insurance hits your bottom line. Did you factor that into your budget? Probably not, right? So that's the thing. Like all those things kind of get missed. And so you've got to know what your number is in order for you to retire comfortably. And it might shock you how high that number probably needs to be, right? And so that's why relying on your business is really risky. Having that be the only asset that you're relying on is super risky. And so you've got to use the cash flow that you're generating while building the business and running the business to start to put some assets and investments on your personal balance sheet away from the business balance sheet. So not only is that diversifying, but it's also starting to build wealth outside of the business, right? And then the last point, you talk about emotional ties and how you feel after the exit. Those emotional ties actually sabotage getting ready for an exit, right? Because you're too tied to being the person in charge. You're too tied to being the person who writes the check, who approves all decisions, who does this, who does that. And you don't delegate and have other people do those sorts of things. that actually sabotages the value of the business or decreases the value of the business that you're trying to build towards. So, it's really tough. You start to thrive on how important you are to the business, but our point is there has to come a point where you start to relinquish those responsibilities in order to build the value of the business. Mm-hmm. And then let's also simultaneously build your own personal net worth outside of the business. We tell clients all the time, assume that the business is going to sell for nothing, or you're going to shut it down, or your kids have no desire to be in the business. And the way that you've built it, there's no value, so nobody else wants it. Let's make sure that you have enough to retire comfortably without selling the business. Meanwhile, we will work with you to get the business fully ready to be sold for the maximum amount possible. And that way, guess what? If you were planning on $200,000 a year in retirement, and that provided you a very comfortable lifestyle, guess what? Now we can provide you $500,000 a year. Or you can build a legacy for your children or your grandchildren, whatever's most, or your charity, church, whatever's most important to you, you can build that for them. But it takes planning along the way and not just increasing your lifestyle based on the increased income that you're generating from the business as you find success.
Man, we need to like write that, frame it up on the wall for every entrepreneur that needs to see that, because that's good stuff, man. All right, what a perfect segue into talking about how to build that retirement plan outside of your business, right? We have a really cool, simple, quick, painless tool that we use, and it's called I think it's called the Freedom Score questionnaire, but it allows you to identify your freedom number, right? And it's essentially like, what is that freedom number for me? What is that big pot of money? What does that need to look like so that I can continue to live the life that I am accustomed to when I no longer am involved in depending on working in the business? So I think we'll make sure we include that link in the show notes. But all right, so let's talk about that. This is a subject very near and dear to us. We do this kind of planning work with clients every single day and have for many, many, many years, which is what we call, shifting some of your wealth, some of your assets from your business balance sheet onto your personal balance sheet, right? And so some of the ways to do that, and these are, these aren't new strategies. These aren't sexy. These aren't shiny. These are just things that work, right? and they're not a be all end all, but they are a great foundation. So you've got SEP IRAs, you've got solo Ks, you've got what most of us, are familiar with, which is 401ks. Also on top of 401ks, you can bolt on other types of profit sharing plans, which can really significantly move the needle. We're not going to go into detail about those, but we'd love to chat with anybody offline about those. You've got traditional, investment accounts in IRAs. You've got real estate. You've got cash. You've got private equity. You've got, all these different things, and all of them are good in their own rights. It's important to be working with a team, whether it's ours or whether it's your current advisor, to be able to understand how much you should have in each of those buckets. And that number is not going to be the same for every person, right? Because different folks have different appetites for risk, and the different pieces of your pie. So real estate versus cash versus stocks, right? They all have different risk return profiles. And so you gotta figure out what is going to work, for you and for your situation. Another thing too, which is, using insurance. We use insurance for a lot of our business owner clients as, it's part of the big picture. It is a piece to the puzzle. We know that insurance gets oversold, and it gets I was going to say underutilized, but that's not what I meant to say. It gets oversold, and it gets positioned in ways that is a little bit misleading at times. But you and I know the importance and the impact of utilizing insurance as a piece to the puzzle, right? And if somebody is leading with that piece, then go get a second and a third opinion before you dump a bunch of money into an insurance policy, because it needs to be designed in the big picture of planning.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Insurance is definitely oversold. I mean, you can think of the large insurance companies, right? If you're working with an advisor for one of the large insurance companies, they're likely going to lead with insurance. Doesn't mean that they can't do proper planning, but you just have to make sure that they, one of our brand new clients recently said, like, my husband always said, she's a widow. My husband always said, don't put all your eggs in one basket, right? So diversification is important. Putting a bunch of money into a life insurance policy may not be the best solution for what you're trying to build, and that's long-term wealth and long-term cash flow. But another point I'll make just real quick on the insurance side is a buy-sell agreement that's funded with life insurance and disability insurance is super important if you have a partner in your business, right? And I alluded to this earlier that I would share a quick example. So we have a client that started a company with two other guys. So there were three of them total. A few years in, two of the guys are looking at each other going, this guy's not carrying his weight. Let's buy him out. And so they work out a deal to buy this person out. He's gone. It's now the two of them. They're kind of getting resettled. We're starting to engage on the planning side. It was just me at the time. It was before Landon and I were business partners. We're starting to engage on the planning, and I'm laying all this out, and we're talking about the importance of key man insurance and buy-sell agreements and funding them with life insurance. And they're saying, yes, we understand it's important, but we're like, 40. Like, I'm not really worried about it right now. We're trying to build the business. And I said, I get it, but this is something that's super important. It's less expensive now. It's an important planning part of what we're dealing with, because there's always these what ifs, the surprises in life that we don't know exactly when or how they're going to happen. And so they finally agree to start this process. And we're literally running quotes for life insurance when the second remaining partner has a massive heart attack and dies at age 45. And so we hadn't gotten it in place yet, which meant that, obviously once the dust settles, once the funeral arrangements are done, once the fact that you just lost one of your best friends and his wife lost a spouse, now we have to go from there, right? And so guess what? At that point, the insurances were required as the buyout, because the attorney on the wife's side, which of course they should have been there representing her best interests, required that be in place in case the final remaining partner also died or became disabled during the buyout period of the spouse, right, of the widow. And so then it was a double whammy. Then it was, I have to pay the insurance the insurance premiums, and I have to buy this widow out with after-tax dollars that would have been completely paid for, all tax-free, with very little investment if it had all been put in place in the beginning, right? So those types of things can really, really hamper the cash flow of the business just because proper planning wasn't completed in time. So just don't get into that trap of, I'm young and I can do that later. Let's do the planning the right way so that you don't have to experience what this particular client of ours had to experience. Anything else to say on that kind of stuff, Landon?
No, that's a good example. We could sit here and rattle off examples for for hours, unfortunately, but we won't go down that rabbit hole. But yeah, let's talk about, as we kind of conclude today, Austin. Let's talk about kind of aligning personal and business goals. We talk a lot about, and the term has gotten a lot more popular in the last couple of years, primarily due to the Exit Planning Institute, and they've got great content that they put out. They've got a great certification, and they are they're moving the needle for business owners. And I think they kind of coined this term, exit readiness. And let's talk about that versus like retirement readiness, because they are very different, right? And they don't always go hand in hand, right? You think of exit readiness, that is essentially getting your business to a point where you are giving your business the best chance at a successful transition, right? And I say the best chance because uh, it doesn't matter how small or big or how well run or poorly run your business is. There is never a guarantee that your business is going to sell, right? Now, the larger that your business gets and the more profit is hitting the bottom line, your chances certainly go up, just because there's a much bigger buyer pool, and strategic buyers come into play. And so there's more, generally speaking, there's more opportunities there once you get into the several $1,000,000 of profit, and above. But we know that only a fraction of businesses ever get, to that size. And so getting your business exit readiness looks very different for each business. And then pairing that up with being, retirement ready, but what you and I like to call like financially independent. Because as we know, as entrepreneurs, none of us can really ever see ourselves retiring. And don't fool yourself into thinking that you're different, because we've also seen it happen many, many, many times where, one of our business owner clients thinks they're going to, ride off into the sunset after they sell their business, and they are essentially back to work in, 3, 6, 12 months. They may not be back to work in the sense of like, owning a business or a W-2, job, but they're doing something. They're doing a consulting project. They are, starting to think about their next, thing, and the wheels are turning, trying to figure out what's going to be next for them, because they think that they're going to play golf or sit on the beach or spend all their time with their grandkids, and that's just not reality for most of us as entrepreneurs, right? We're driven, to do stuff, to move the needle, to grow, to build. And so that usually leads to wanting to continue to do something after, quote unquote, retirement.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, Landon, both of them have similar traits, right? But I guess the best way to kind of separate the two is exit readiness is your business ready
Mm-hmm.
to be sold, right? Or to be exited. Now you have to personally be ready too, right? But then retirement readiness or financial independence, that is you, right? And both of them do have financial and mental aspects, right? You have to be mentally ready to be able to walk away from your business. You have to be mentally ready to walk across the bridge to retirement, right? Or not being the person in charge any longer. But you also have to be financially ready for both, right? So are the financials in order for the business? And is it ready to be sold? Is the management team in place? Is everything ready to where somebody can receive the keys from you and pick up where you left off and hopefully take it to new heights, right? That means your business was ready to be exited. And you were ready to walk away from it by, like I said, the mental readiness, and that the business is worth enough that gives you the financial readiness to walk away as well, right? Mm-hmm. And then the retirement side, right? Like the combination of your outside investments, your non-business investments, and your business, was it enough? Are you truly ready? And then are you mentally ready to deal with the fact that the phone stopped ringing, you got nowhere to be on Monday morning. Nobody's counting on you any longer for that, because the money's in the bank, the money's in your investments. You're ready to kind of live off of the proceeds, so to speak. And you literally have nowhere to be except for where you choose to be. Could be the golf course, could be whatever it is, for you, spending time with your spouse, your kids, your grandkids, whatever that looks like. But you've got to be ready for that. Right. I've had multiple multiple clients say, man, I mean, I can play golf 4 or 5 days a week. That'll be awesome. We've also had clients who got 6 months into retirement and had played golf 4 or 5 times a week for 6 months. And now they're bored and they want their job back, or they want their business back, or they want to go get a different job, or they want to start another business, or they, whatever it is. Mm-hmm. And so part of getting yourself mentally ready for that is that what's coming next, and that you have to have something there that's impactful to you, right? And most of the time, if it's impactful to you, it's impactful to other people, meaning that you're having an impact on other people. And you got to decide what that is for you. It could be mentoring, it could be volunteering, it could be whatever that looks like for you. But there needs to be the what comes next plan in your life, not just, do I have enough money to retire comfortably and be financially independent for the rest of my life?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Well said. All right. So let's close this out, and we're going to pose the question, right, for you to walk away and think about, which is, if I can't sell the business, would I still be able to retire? Right. So think about that. And for in most cases, in our experience, talking with probably hundreds of business owners, maybe thousands, that might be pushing it, but definitely hundreds over our career, the answer is generally no, right? Because you've got personal expenses intertwined in the business. You're used to making $200,000, $300,000, $500,000 plus a year. And in order to replace that, you need a very large pot of money. So something to help move you forward. Download the Business Owner's Retirement Readiness Checklist. That's a good first step. And then hit us up. We've got a process that we take, prospective clients through, and there's no obligation. We spend a significant amount of time through 2 meetings to basically do a full assessment of your situation, put together a proposal that is very unique and custom to you. And then we mutually decide if it's a good fit, and there's no cost to that. And at the very minimum, you will walk away with some really good insights into your business and your personal situation. So we welcome anybody to come do that. Next episode, we'll see y'all on June 24th at 10:30 Mountain Time. Episode is Built to Exit: How Financial Planning Shapes a Profitable Transition. We appreciate y'all listening, and we'll see you in a couple weeks. To your success.
You've been listening to Tycoons of Small Biz, a podcast for small business owners by small business owners. Be sure to follow us on our social media channels for links to all our episodes and great content around growing, investing in, buying, and selling small businesses. This podcast is distributed for informational purposes only. Statements made in the podcast are not to be construed as personalized investment or financial planning advice, may not be suitable for everyone, and should not be considered as solicitation to engage in any particular investing or planning strategy. Listeners should conduct their own review and exercise judgment, or consult with their professional financial advisor to see how the information contained in this podcast may apply to their own individual circumstances. All investing involves risk of loss, including the possible loss of principal. Past performance does not guarantee future results, and nothing in this podcast should be construed as a guarantee of any specific outcome or profit. All market indices discussed are unmanaged, do not incur management fees, costs, and expenses, and cannot be invested into directly. Investment advisory services offered by Backbone Planning Partners, LLC. Neither Backbone Planning Partners, LLC, nor its representatives provide legal or accounting advice. The content of this podcast represents the views and opinions of Austin Peterson and Landon Mance, and/or the podcast guest, and do not necessarily represent the views or opinions of Backbone Planning Partners, LLC. Statements made in this podcast are subject to change without notice. Neither Backbone Planning Partners, LLC, nor its representatives, the podcast host, or its guests have an obligation to provide revised statements